Hello, everybody. I know it's been a while, yet again, but this I think I have a slightly partly legitimate reason. I was in Canada for a week, and just because I have been up there once before in my early 20s, visiting some friends up there, but never went on like a solo trip, so I just decided to do that. But I'm gonna try to maybe make that for another video. But yeah, I also had my novel got back a couple weeks ago. I had my editing kind of professionally done, and I'm hoping to be able to, and I've been procrastinating more than I should have been on that, just looking on what the notes are on that, giving it like a deep dive. But yeah, but anyway, but for to now, I'm going to be talking about Ice by Anna Kavan. She was born Helen Roberts, I believe, Helen Emily Roberts, and she took on the pen name Annika Von, I think, at some point. I'm not sure when. This is my first book by her, so I don't know like a whole lot about her. I do know kind of the cursory details of her life. She was born 1901, and she had a very troubled life throughout like her whole trajectory. I think. Um, I do know that there was a heroin addiction, and this was kind of something I thought was kind of an odd pairing. Not to say that it's completely out of the question, but that this you usually see that it's almost like writers have. I'm not using the Hemingway or Richard Brautigan kind of example of the typical kind of hard drinking kind of people, but you usually see that kind of. It's usually you don't see that hard drugs like heroin where I've heard opium. I've heard Confessions of an Opium Reader, by Thomas De Quincey. But I've never heard of, at least off the top of my head, of an author, unless I just haven't. There's some authors that I do enjoy that have secretly harbored these addictions. But yeah, I never heard of. But she took it so. I highly recommend looking up more of her because there's some really interesting kind of takes on her in interviews, and I'm not sure how much by way of personal interviews she's had, but I do know that there were some where she was claimed to have said that she was able to reach the brink of some spiritual kind of um, delirium or some kind of something where she was able to make herself as like um, desperately like she's like purposefully almost like expediting her own death in a way, and that's kind of reminds me of the Freudian death drive, and also like the Dostoevskian kind of um, the way that epilepsy for him kind of made him see expanded his mind in a way before it ultimately kind of terrified him as well. But anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked. So Ice was her last novel, and it was published in 1967. I want to say, and it follows it on its face. If you look at just like the um, plot line, kind of just the plot points, kind of it seems pretty simple. It follows a man, and he's following this woman that he has had some previous relations with, and it's not really sure if they were romantically paired together or whether or not they were just friends. But you get to know more. These layers are kind of slowly peel back as the story goes on. But yeah, it's not a long novel. It's probably a bit maybe no more than a couple hundred pages. And it gets pretty. I just want to warn you, it really does get depressing. People say that it's like one of the hardest books that they went through. I've heard. I found maybe just because it's kind of a little bit up my alleyway, just because of, and if it's not, then it's definitely stuff that have no problem challenging myself. I mean, I think Kafka definitely uh comes to mind a little bit, but it's been characterized as a post-apocalyptic novel, and I've heard other people um, say that that's not quite reflective of the actual, because it's actually it's a during apocalyptic, so it's not post-apocalyptic. It's not like taking place post hoc or after the fact. It's actually taking place during an apocalypse. And this is where the very simple title, which is alluring right off the bat. This is why I was so when somebody recommended it to me, I was like, "Whoa, I gotta give this a shot." So, um, I heard she was a really good short story writer on top of that too, just to get that out there. But this almost seems like a short story that kind of turned into a novel. But I've heard so basically, yeah, it's about this man pursuing a woman, and the narrative gets really like densely packed with dream imagery. It's like to the point where the dream imagery, like you're not sure where the dreams begin and where reality starts. So that's or ends rather, and that is really hard. Kind of, it's that's a really that when I heard that some of the most like sublime but also like off-putting kind of descriptions of like the ice and like the way that these after this this land which turns into this giant kind of chasm, it's like a kind of an empty tundra. It's basically an icy tundra, and he's going to visit her in this area, and there's lots of warnings and kind of like everything seems to be dispersed out into farmlands. People have like left almost in kind of an agrarian kind of a lifestyle that they've taken up because they've my kind of assumption is that the city kind of has kind of fallen by the wayside, and that most of the cities in metropolitan areas are kind of are just kind of not holding up, and they're all kind of uh, following them, basically going out and retreating into different like more into the countryside. So this is where most of it takes place. Is he's visiting her father, the young lady. She's about 20 years old, I think, and she's really young, but she feels spurned, like they've that she's already spurned already, and she's it's a very convoluted relationship between them because there's like a push pull dynamic where the way he describes her, and it's from his point of view. The and none of the characters actually have names throughout this whole thing. None of them have traditional, like Jack and Mary Sue, or whatever. Um, all of them have like or left in like complete anonymity, and that's where Kafka kind of comes in because you see him using initials, little kind of scrawling and scribblings, and or sometimes just completely using or leaving them up to a mystery. So that's kind of the illusion that I got is that these characters are kind of almost like archetypal dream forms. They're like kind of shapes in the contours that are taken up in a um, purely in kind of a oniric state, I suppose. Not to put words in like her mouth or anything, to say that it's. But I did. My impression was that the relationship. I thought I've seen this kind of dynamic before, where it's like he's kind of going into her, because he had feelings for her, but it's like it's more complicated than that. He's trying to track her down and kind of save her, but he has his own kind of selfish reasons. As the novel goes on, you start to realize he's quite the unreliable narrator too. I know that's kind of a trope. I know that's an easy cliche to throw around. It's like, oh, it's an unreliable narrator. Oh, that's why you can get away with doing this, X, Y, and Z. But I do feel like it really does hit the nail on the head, and I think it's a perfect kind of narrating style for Anna Kavan's like very strange, alluring mysteries. And they all have some purpose in the end. I think the way that I don't want to give too much away, as per my usual inclinations to kind of spoil everything, but I do want to kind of leave this one a little bit up. But yeah, so the man ends up tracking her down, the young lady, and she's described as very fractious and a gentle, very shy and very sheltered, and not just because not but for good reasons, I think, because the fact that her mother was very it is revealed earlier in the novel that the her mother was a very controlling, kind of a I don't know what the kind of psychological term for that, kind of the devouring mother aspect or the archetype, and she kind of always saw like the worst in her daughter, and kind of planted these very negative kind of uh, this she's described as both kind of a gentle and then at some points like very beautiful kind of a youth, and that he's drawn to that kind of thing, but at the same time she's also a bit of an old soul, like she's kind of feels embittered, like she's lived like 1,000 years already. She's like so she has like such a unique kind of blend of all these different conflicting traits that the narrator is kind of gets himself enmeshed in, and he cannot, like, it's strange, but that's kind of how you see some relationships play out in real life too, right? You see like the kind of the heroic, white knight guy wants to kind of get involved um uh with a very kind of emotionally volatile, maybe well, vulnerable kind of younger lady, um and to kind of save her, but I kind of I think I'm not trying to write these out as if they're just cliches, but I think with in Ice throughout the whole thing, there's all these kind of very hard to describe. I don't think I've the way Anna Kavan's way of describing stuff is very there's an inimitable style to it. It's like you can't crack what she's trying to get at. Um, so I wish I could just read aloud some quotes, but I unfortunately I don't have the internet right here at the moment. But um, yeah, just take a look, just crack it open. It's it's uh it's just like every page it's like this um but yeah, these it but it starts out, it does have a kind of push, like a kind of interesting vicissitudes of different events and fortuitous um manner of how things unfold. Like it starts out in one way you think, or at least in one way I thought it was going to anticipate it to go out, and then for it to only to turn into a completely different scenario. So I thought that was a um she kept always kept you on your toes, I think. And yeah, the character of the young woman's father kind of has a very kind of protective kind of inclinations as well, where he's is trying to, at some points he threatens the main character as well, when he brings them up on this hill, on this like castle, this old kind of abandoned castle on a hill. He's like kind of like jokes around with kind of like pushing him off the edge as in a really weirdly threatening manner. But there's right off the bat you get these things like earlier in the novel that are presaging not really not your typical kind of happy-go-lucky heroes, like really just happy. But you see these Annika Vaughn's own reflections in her struggle too with addiction too, going back to her thing, because it's like it's ultimately um, inextricably tied into this narrative, are these things of addiction, and the fact that too, that I forgot to bring this up, but the relationship between the very um, like uh, complicated back and forth between the main character and the woman are like uh, addiction in a way, where you feel like on one hand it's like making you feel on top of the world, and very it's giving you everything you need, like, and on the other hand it's like very draining, and you can feel how like completely opposite kind of inclinations as you have all these different kind of polarizing um instincts within you, like fighting, competing for control. And it's like that's kind of how I see um how I took away, or what I took away from understanding Anna Kavan's novel. But yeah, I definitely recommend. It's definitely turned me on to her work, and I'm definitely gonna try to start reading more of her stuff, and even if it's just shorter stuff for the moment. And yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one.